So we're recording now. It's March maybe 19th, I think, 2020. And we're entering in more acutely here in North America and beyond, depends where you're at, to a global pandemic. And it's the equinox, indeed. And I'm Daniel Foor. Some of you have met me in some capacity and others not so much. I feel like it's good to say just a word about who I am and why you might even be here. I am a doctor of psychology and licensed marriage and family therapist, so I have that background. My ancestors of blood are German, English, Irish, early settler colonialist to North America. So I live with my family here in Western North Carolina. And I'm a ritualist. I'm a priest, if you will, and a student of different earth honoring systems. And that priesthood or that ritual work focuses especially on work with the ancestors and work with spirits of place and on cultural change. And so that's what I'm up to with my life. So I have a whole practice about that. I don't have some particular scientific or pandemic specialization per se, but I have a strong anchoring in animist or relational values that can be a useful complement to all the other important skills in this particular moment. And in that spirit, let's actually start off our shared hour with a bit of relational awareness, which will look like me spending less than 5 minutes just talking you through a basic grounding, centering, and noticing who already is resourcing you and supporting you in spirit. So there's not an intent to do some big dramatic thing, but just to gather your focus and energy a bit. So if you'd like to participate, I'll talk you through that. Let's start by just allowing, for me, I usually use my breath, but allow your awareness to settle, not just in your upper body, but in your heart and your belly, your hips and feet. You might, with your breath, invite your energy to be more fully through your body, but inhabit your space, even if you're working with pain or whatever it is, just to be all the way present in your body. And as you're settling even more into your own space, see if there's at least one helper, protector, kind ancestor, however that is for you. One that you trust in spirit, that would be present with you and would be near to you in this moment. And invite that one to be even more consciously present with you.
I don't know what happened to my audio. It was on and then it muted.
And from that place of being dropped in and connected to at least one supportive power, ask that this one assist you in taking just a moment to clear from your personal space anything that actually really is not so good for you right now. There's a bit of clearing, cleansing, washing, releasing from whatever's in your space that doesn't need to be there. So take just a moment with that if you would. And at your own rhythm, finally ask this supportive presence you've called that you know already and trust to just establish gently a layer of protection around your space. Doesn't have to be a fearful big boundary, but just that you have a bit of containment and affirming of your own sovereignty in space. So from that place, the final thing, and then we'll be in conversation, from this embodied, resourced, protected space, just be curious about the conditions outside your benign, friendly little bubble. That you can notice that there's all kinds of things going on, but one of the things is an increased amount of fear and turbulence in the world. And you can notice that and not allow that to automatically be translated into where you're at. So that's the first thing that I guess I want to lead with is the conditions are never optimal for cultivating awareness or presence or good character or whatever we're supposed to be doing here on Earth, something like that. But sometimes, sometimes they're even more intense, and it's still possible, and even more so our responsibility to a large degree to be responsible for how we're showing up in the moment and our own state. And it could be that we got to work at it a bit more when the collective energy is freaking out a bit. And so that's the baseline, is if you can do whatever you know helps you to hold your center, that allows us to be more responsive and more useful in whatever happens next. I know if folks wouldn't mind just staying on mute, I can kind of track it, but then my attention goes a little divided. On the most tangible of levels, I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to get into all that, but I would say it's important at this time to self-isolate, to trust the science, to be informed. At least in the United States, I know it's true in the UK, the government responses have not been congruent with the scientific consensus on what actually helps to reduce the amount of suffering. And that's, we could say a lot of things about that, but let me say in a real general way that it leaves individuals with the task of becoming informed, and at the very least doing what you and those near to you need to do nonetheless. So that's probably obvious. Hopefully you don't need to hear that from me necessarily. I would say that it's my read on the situation as someone who's trying to stay attuned to what's happening, that it's more of a marathon than a sprint. So in terms of our stance, it's important to be settling in for a situation that is going to be a real before and after kind of thing in the world. And however that plays out, the level of interruption and attention that everyone has now turned to what's happening has the potential to be really defining. And of course, the prediction is for anywhere from a lot to a whole lot of hardship ahead. So that I don't presume to know what's going to happen with that, but my gut sense says that what a lot of the really informed people are saying probably has some merit. Therefore, it's important that we settle in a bit. And that includes a few basic principles of making sure, not in a competitive scarcity minded way, that you're making whatever basic preparations you need for yourself. And the more prepared you are personally, the more positioned we are to be helpful to others. And when it's a long situation that unfolds in layers, it could be that it's your turn to rotate in and be helpful in early June or in September or something like that. And so there's a real pacing of our response in that way. And knowing that the more diligent we are, the more we are positioned to help others. Because it is time to be generous and connective. There's a lot of folks that are really vulnerable. And I would say the majority of the people who are especially vulnerable don't see themselves in that way. And people tend to just see themselves as going about their lives. And so, those are just basic things that I think most people are already tracking. Another thing that I think is actually a blessing is to really be thinking more locally on a lot of levels. There's a way in which suddenly we walked around and met more of our neighbors the other day. And so things like that. Okay. Those are basic, like, hey folks, we're heading into it, if you hadn't noticed. You can hear that same basic wisdom from a whole bunch of other people. Let me try to say a little bit about the psychological layer now that I'm tracking. One, there's a whole bunch of different responses, which I notice also myself, which is kind of fascinating. Like, I think when you do a lot of inner work over the years, I'm not sure if your amount of inner bullshit actually decreases or if you're just more able to see it. So it's kind of fascinating to watch all the responses. Like, one, of course, is denial. They're like, well, it's not happening now. Like, you're at the beach and like, wow, the water's going out. There couldn't possibly be a tsunami. That's when the water comes in. So that kind of like response is is not super helpful, but it's good to be able to notice it in ourselves and others and be kind about it. And then there's the minimizing of it and the catastrophizing of like seeing it as like the apocalyptic end of the world or not a big deal, because it's really hard to hold medium scale things in our awareness psychologically. And it's especially hard to sit with the reality of we're not sure how it's going to play out. It could be real bad or just kind of bad, or we're not sure yet really. And that's tough to sit with. And it's good to notice it. And it's good to notice if it's our habit to just see the horror and the suffering, or to just want to see the dolphins in the canal in Venice, which I'm happy for them. That's like, it's good. Go clean water in Venice. And I'm happy the penguins got to move around at the zoo in Chicago. And so it's good to notice if you're stuck in one channel. Because the underlying energy that is present for me at times. I imagine it's present for all of you at times, even if you're really like going person or whatnot, it's the energy of fear. And fear is one of the toughest feelings to sit with. It's super uncomfortable. And not only, but especially for men or people socialized as men. And so fear can cause people to do amazingly dysfunctional things to avoid feeling it. And it's really closely connected to anxiety. And it's not delusional in this situation because there are a lot of uncertainties. And there are, the big one being like, am I going to die? Are my loved ones going to die this month or next month? Or are my older parents in Ohio going to die and then I won't be able to go to their funeral? Or. So all the different scenarios, that's a legit possibility. And it was a possibility a month ago, but now the odds of it are much higher. And so that's real. And another kind of response to notice is, and it's this is especially present in social media culture, which we're all likely to participate in even more now, is masking fear with cleverness. And it's really, I know I can do it as well. When other people do it, I'm annoyed with it, probably because I do it also. And the move is basically to find something that people aren't speaking to, or to highlight some aspect of the situation that guards against the vulnerability of not being able to control so much right now. And just being real clever about it, or real witty, or real critiquing of the system and all that. And all that's valid, but if you're using it to not be with the vulnerability, then I would suggest that the vulnerability is especially precious and optimal kind of zone to be in. Not all the time, but just to, this isn't a moment, I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's not a moment to seek to be special. That's my bias. It's a moment to be with other people in a real human, sort of unifying, humbling way. This is something that happens in animist ritual, which is to say, or just life. When you have a framework where you recognize the other than humans, whether it's virus people or bears or tulips, that they're all people, that at any given point they might speak in some way. And we might be having an argument. Let's say we're having a political argument is about who's the best candidate or why our government's broken. And then suddenly there's a very small, powerful person who steps in and begins to change all the systems. So in that moment, it's a conversation between virus and human. And the pivot, the opportunity in that is that we can actually move as human. That there's a possibility that some of the entrenched divisiveness can dissipate in a way that when conditions change, it doesn't actually have to all reform in this old calcified way. So that, I think that's part of the opportunity, is to participate in that softening by not being an ass about the situation, and being kind, and being able to say, I'm scared, or this is hard. It's hard to be home all day, or whatever your experience is. And so that's psychologically, that's my main thing, is like, it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to actually be needy, and to allow people to help you, and to be the one, even maybe you're real able-bodied, you have some money in the bank even, or you have your needs provided, but you're just like having a super fucking anxious day because you were already anxious, and now you just like tried to bring in the groceries and you don't know if you got yourself sick, and you just kind of want to cry. Like, it's okay to feel that, and even more so, it's okay to bring that vulnerability to somebody else who's having a stronger day. So that permission to struggle is part of a gift that we can bring to things. And we might not be the one to help that day, because somebody might, you might turn to somebody and they're having an even harder day. So you gotta, this is a time where how much relational wealth we've been investing is tested. Like, how's our social network? Have we been caring for that? Yeah. But there's a fair chance that we could head into things like food shortages at times, or food, medicine shortages, deaths without funerals, interruption in basic services. And when it's like that, it's an opportunity to get so slowed down and dropped in, and notice all of the fear that arises, and to know that we have choice in how we respond to that. So that's coming. That's a bit about in some form, I imagine that's coming. That's what I would say about the psychological layer is give yourself permission to feel all of it if you can. There's a strong, let's talk about the, excuse me, the so-called spiritual level of the thing, not from a place of saying, I know what that is. But what I can bring to it is a curiosity that's informed by hanging out with traditions and systems and teachers that see the spirits of disease, for example, the smalls in general, but especially the smalls that intersect humans in a way that cause illness, that see them as people. They're gods, they're big powers. In Buryat Mongol tradition, at least as I learned it from Sarangarel Odagon, the Eastern Tengur, I believe, are associated with the disease spirits. And I don't know a lot about them besides that they have their place in the universe and no one would think to like remove them, so to speak. They are original inhabitants of this earth. They are ancient ancestors and they're powerful and they will speak when they choose to speak. And I know that the meaning, like this, it's an understandable impulse to want to make meaning from a thing. And it's possible to notice that impulse and actually decline to make a story about it. That's all right. This is kind of a very Zen strategy in some ways, is to intentionally decline the making of a big story about a thing. We don't necessarily respond more skillfully just because we've made some big story about it. That said, I think the most common story folks are making is, that I know of, in my weird subculture that I'm connected to, is the story that the earth is either like hitting back on one personification or correcting itself, or there's a kind of ecological balancing thing that's happening. And I don't, I feel ambivalent about that a little bit. Where I personally don't resonate with it is where it starts to take on what for me sounds like a moralistic, sort of evangelical Christian God posing as the earth is making you die because you've been bad earth people kind of thing. It's not my place to be judgmental of others who find helpful meaning in that. But for me, I don't feel personally like there is a moralistic hitting back. But to bring a more nuanced attempt at exploring meaning, as a student of traditional Yoruba, West African tradition, one of many West African traditional wisdoms, there are a couple powers in that system which might be relevant to name. One is the Iyami, Oshoranga, the ancestral mothers, or the Aye, the witches. One of the ways of referring to them is the earth, the world. And they're associated directly with the earth. And some among them are quite potent, and there's a sense of unrestrained, untamably raw and potent energy. And that can manifest especially when there's not an appropriate honoring of the feminine, of women, of all body types, as not being it's not a cis excluding way of saying women, and of just life and the fundamental goodness of life and the earth and the waters. And so in that sense, it is a way of saying those powers may bring balance through an energy that checks the harm. That's not that different from what I was just suggesting, but somehow it's easier for me to get checked by the ancient powerful grandmothers than by the Christian daddy God. But that's just that sounds rude. I'm sorry to be rude like that. I just mean Sorry. Another power in Yoruba traditions that is especially worth naming here is Obaluaye, Babaluaye, Omalu, or different lineages. See those deities as the same or different, but we'll say Obaluaye. Let me go ahead actually and type that into the chat just in case anybody wants to wiki it, so to speak. But this deity is a deity of infectious disease and traditionally of smallpox, but and again is looked at in different ways and different lineages, but is seen as a manifestation of the earth and also as constitutionally hot. The Orisha Bibona is a hot-tempered deity. And in this sense, the rituals for Obaluaye tend to have a feeding, but also cooling, asking Baba to be cool, to be cool. And there's not a message that disease is inherently bad, but there's a recognition that we may not wish to die of it personally or to have our communities ravaged by disease. And so the invitation in that sense is to bring cool spectrum energy. So it's a good time to honor the mothers and the feminine in a big way, including in their form as the body that is the earth. And it's a good time to bring coolness and humility. In some of the stories of Obaluaye, this deity has an aversion to people who are coming with arrogance, and so brings the gift of humbling and humility, and is sometimes seen as being treated poorly because of the experience of suffering through illness, of being outcast, of exiled. And so it's a time to be mindful in that sense of what are we disowning, what are we excluding? And when we do that, when we cast out certain aspects of human culture, of ourselves, of our vulnerability, then those things come back fiercely to demand attention. Another reference from Yoruba culture is of the Agile Goon, or the elder, you could say destructive, I suppose, forces of the universe, death, illness. Arun is a Agile Goon of illness. And the Agile Goon are not seen as evil per se either. They're just doing their thing. And they have their place, they have their turn, they have their wisdom to bring. And one of the remedies for those types of risks or harms, at least in the tradition, is to go to Ifa, to go to divination, to go to the deities. And one general principle from that is to say, where are you personally in alignment or not with your own specific destiny? Because in the places where you're not in alignment will be the places where the trouble gets in. So you can take as a general principle the times as an urgent call or nudge or demand, even to make sure that if you were pretty aligned, but also kind of like procrastinating, stuff like that, that it's a time to actually get particularly aligned and to cut out distractions and to focus in as if it's your last life on, or last life on earth maybe, but last year, I was going to say. And not in an uptight way, but in a like, focus now. Do we have your attention kind of way? So that's useful. That's useful to me to say grieving and cooling energies, humility, honoring of the mothers, and renewing clarity, deepening your understanding of what you're here to do. So for me, those are some very general kind of takeaways. There's one other it's two other things I'll say, and then we'll take a minute and drop in and listen a bit, and then open it up if folks want to share a thing. It's with the humans for the greater good. Seems clear that keeping our distance is, in generally speaking, there's some nuance to it, respect to the people who aren't able to do that because they're handling things like garbage and food and medicine and etc. But it's good to keep distance for a minute to flatten the curve, as it were. And with the spirits, it's actually a good time to do the opposite of that. It's a good time to network. So you take your impulse to relationality and to intimacy and drive it into your work with the spirits. That can look like actually getting stuff healed up with your ancestors so that your subtle immune system and your larger energy body are more fortified. You're more likely to survive it if you get it. It can, or you're more likely to transition well to become an ancestor if you get it and don't survive, or if you die from something else. And it also is a way of really interrupting the dominant colonialist frame by remembering or maybe realizing for the first time that you can have super intimate relationships with people who aren't human, with deities, with the river near your house, which you never slowed down to really greet, or with the companion plants in your home who you just watered like they were things, or with the people in your life who you thought you knew, but you didn't know as well as they wanted to be known by you. Or. So it's, you might notice that being around less humans, you feel lonelier, but that limitation that's imposed by the circumstances can be a catalyst to enjoy way more intimacy in a way that then endures once the limitation is released. And if a lot of folks did that, that supports a cultural shift where that becomes even more the norm. And even emotionally constipated, tangled up white people start to be more animist and more earth honoring and more willing to hold the value that it's not just humans that matter. What is happening is not, the meaning isn't scripted. So some of that's up to what your own ancestors and your own power show for you. And so in that sense, you want to bring it to them. In the bigger collective sense, there are deities walking the earth now that weren't doing it in the same way a few months ago. Certain things have been opened up. There are certain powers on the move. That's a bit intense. Those powers are not inherently compatible with staying alive. And heads up, that's real. That's not personal. So there are, you know, the giants walk the earth, strange little giants, but the smalls have a kind of collective intelligence, and they're not as small in stature as one might think. So that's weird. That's another level of it. But I'm not suggesting that it's ritually exactly what you want to do to ask the coronavirus what it's doing and all that. You can, but traditionally, it's not my understanding that the lay people who are kind of new to ritual are the ones to directly consult with the disease spirits in a time of trouble. So unless, you know, if you have a dream about a thing, that's different if they come to you. Or if you are a carrier for the virus because you get it, that's different. But don't feel like you need to like solve the collective problem by eating a bunch of mushrooms and asking the virus what its secret name is and then posting that on Facebook. You could, but mostly like get clear about your own destiny and like know that the powers are real. Like I call them disease spirits, but the word spirits is a little superfluous. It's they're elder big forces. I don't know. I've seen them a little bit and I'm like, whoa, you're above my pay grade. Good to see you, you know? So that's it. Let's take a minute while we're here and listen in with the spirits. I said that would be a part of the time, and that feels important. We did a basic drop-in at the start, and I'll invite that again for just a few minutes, and then we'll allow for a few folks, if you want to say a thing, you could raise your hand in the chat, but bring your attention back to your own heart and body and centeredness, and to the ones that you noticed at the start of the call. If you weren't here for that, just any supportive powers that you want to call into your space, invite them to be present. Take another moment and tend to your own protection and make sure your personal space is clear and fortified in that way. And from that place, see if you can just sit in steady, grounded curiosity, not needing to reach for anything, not needing to make anything happen. And just hold the question, like to your own inner divinity or to the spirits that support you, gently. Is there anything you want me personally to be seeing about this moment that I'm not already seeing? Is there anything about this moment we're living right now that the spirits want you to see that you're not already seeing? So honoring whatever that might be, the final thing here, I want you to see if you can attune to, without reaching outside yourself, see if you can just notice that there are millions and millions, really, of other people also listening right now, also moving in the world with an open heart. Besides the people that are dying right now and being born and doing whatever they're doing, there's a lot of folks that are sitting with this. What is the gift? What is the invitation of this moment? How interesting. Even if I die, like, how interesting. What's the invitation? And see if you can notice yourself among them, that we are in this really together. And that, what a delight. What an interesting moment. So if it supports you to stay with that, great, to just stay with that. If it supports you to type or share a thing that was present for you in the chat, just to share that with others, that's welcome. If there are one or a few folks who want to express succinctly through speaking, then you could raise your hand. I see Allison had your hand up from the start. You're welcome to speak if it still has energy right now. And if anyone else, we have a big call, lots of folks, and it feels connective to allow a little space for people to share something from the heart. And if you would just share where you're calling from, you'd be welcome. Anyone is welcome to just take themselves off mute if you do want to share. It's hard for me to
Hi.
track so many people in the hall. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. This is Melinda from South Florida. I'm here in Tamarack, and I wanted to say this is Shekhinah Heartbeats. I made her myself. She's Shekhinah, and we share our heartbeat with all of you. And thank you so very much for showing up and doing this with us. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thanks, Melinda. Yeah. If somebody wants to speak, it's welcome. Otherwise, I'm going to say a few other things.
Hi,
Yeah.
it's Melissa from White Salmon, Washington,
Great.
Chinook Indian lands. And I just wanted to say that I've followed this virus for a long time. And thank you for having this gathering. And I just want to say that secondary and tertiary and quaternary nursing is going to be needed. So keep yourselves well. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Spice. I'm calling in from the Bay Area. I actually used to live in Asheville also, so I know that area as well. And I think I just wanted to say that something that's really been helpful for me is staying in the present as much as possible. It's so easy to move forward with these ideas of like, this is what's going to happen. We're all trying to figure out how is it going to be? Is it going to be really bad or kind of bad? How many people are going to die? And while I think it's really wonderful and needed to be prepared, I think it's also just important to really stay in the present moment and not let ourselves get too much in the future, running in the future of what's going to happen. So I hope that we all have health and happiness and strength moving forward through this.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I ask what you think the role of the artist is right now at this moment in time?
There's a bit of wind, but speak strongly into the heart of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can speak to what you see the role of the artist is to be in a moment like this.
Yeah. I feel like I'm an artist who does a lot of admin work. So I'm like, am I an artist? Yeah, I think so. I'm a ritualist. One of the many functions of art, even that way of saying it's a little depressing, is to bring beauty and meaning and coherence to an otherwise unharmonious moment. And so that way in which art, in the many forms in which that plays out, has a function of bringing connectivity and coherence, that's going to be especially important through all that's ahead. And it's important to not piece it together too quick. Sometimes the role of art is to shatter a thing that needs shattering, and is to actually accelerate the falling apart. this is a moment where certain structures that need to go may actually loosen. In the United States, I'm like, he's got issues with his campaign, but overall, I like Sanders' platform. I don't want to get too political, but now, like within a month, the government's like, we need to send people a lot of money. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, y'all are getting real socialist real quick. And it's a time, regardless of the politics of that, or, I don't have a definitive read on it, but what is interesting to me is that under duress, people's views can get very, adaptable and change. And if people then experience, oh, we actually kind of really liked that sharing thing, why don't we keep doing that? So there are all kinds of possibilities that can arise. One of the things for me that's been present, I'll share, is unexpectedly, I shared this in another call the other day, but the deity of Ogun in Yoruba culture, of iron and of building the house, building the road of civilization, is a deity that has a lot of grounded, messy willingness to get in and like make a thing happen or do a thing. It's like the opposite of perfectionism. And Ogun, of all the deities, is willing to act and willing to get messy with life. And this one's been showing up for me recently as a way of saying, it's not a time to be perfectionistic. The change that you all want, if you really want it, is going to be messy. It's going to be difficult. And some people are going to die, and it's going to be hard. But if we're going to do it, let's do it. So I think we're headed into a cycle where it's going to be a bit messy, so to speak. But for people that have already been suffering under the many different types of oppressions, it's been that way already. It's not like if you don't see this already that way, you're in the privilege bubble. So I'm hopeful in that regard that the unpredictability of the times can yield a lot of beauty and healing and different structural change that's really needed if we can keep our attention on receiving the potential of the times. There's a tracking for what the potential is and receiving that. So good. Does anybody else have something from the heart that wants to say a thing?
Hello, Daniel.
Hey.
Hi, it's Gay Louise calling in from Australia here.
Yeah, I see you now. Hey.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's an important time for us all to be united, because I think the powers that be will take advantage of our panic and really try to manipulate the situation and, declare martial law and all of this sort of stuff. So we're headed for some pretty rough times ahead in terms of, financial economy and things like that. They could take all our money. They can introduce all sorts of things to keep us really under control. And I think we need to be very aware of all that and really stay united and stay with other people, because that's the only way we can defeat harsh regimes that are really going to come into play.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm.
Our ancestors, everybody's ancestors on this call, have lived and died through times of plague, of big illness, also famine. And not always, but often during those times, there's an increase in innovation on the other side of them. We almost went extinct about 70,000 years ago, and there were a lot of cultural innovations that came after that. And so the adversity will drive creativity in a big way. To the question about the art, so to speak. I want to share one way in which I'm attempting to respond usefully Seda can put the link in the chat if you would, Seda. And we threw together an offering last night. It's an online course. There are other online courses which I'm guiding on ritual foundations and animism, and all those have a lot of live conference time, and so we'll be in that way responsive to the times also. But this particular offering, Bring Out Your Dead, Ancestral Healing for Poxy Times, we are pleased with our amount of snark, for one, and also pleased that the offering is quite accessible in the sense that you can pay the regular amount, the lower amount than that, or the pay it forward, no dollars exchanged amount. And I don't usually have a free setting at the online courses, but this one felt right to do it that way. And the what I'm trying to not call it free, it's pay it forward, like actually be committed to your own self that you're going to do something tangibly helpful for someone near to you. And we'll get together for an hour and a half a week, basically like this. But instead of it being more discussion-y and I guess you'd say intro level, we're going to actually dive into ritual work and do some work with our own ancestors. And if you don't have that framework, you'll kind of want it, because I'm not going to teach it in the space. We're just going to get in and do the thing for people who've already been doing that with me. And then the other half of the time will be synchronized ritual for the greater. Because there's a lot of witchy people who know that in training with others actually is very practical and useful for ritual results. And so we'll be using in a nice way the group field or the group energy as a way to get some work done. So that'll be once a week. And if you can't make it live, then you could listen to the recordings and still make use of it. And yeah, so that'll be happening. I hope you might consider joining us if this type of meetup space serves you well. And you know this, I think, but I said it the other day, but the calm before the storm is not the storm. We're in the calm before the storm, for the most part. And conditions are about to change more tangibly. There's a lot of fear about what's coming. And unless I'm misreading it, maybe false alarm, could be, kind of hope so. But if it's not that, then what's coming is going to be unpleasant in a lot of ways. And like we're on day 6 of cooped up homeschooling, and bless people who have more than one child. And day 20 of that, somebody needs to mute if you don't mind. Day 20 of that is going to feel real different than day 40, than day 60, etc. So we're heading into intense time. And so it could be that it's good to maintain a thread of connection and drop in with ritual. So if that supports you, we're creating a space for that. So that's mostly what I wanted to share. We could take a minute before we sign off to just entrain for another minute if you want. And
I have a question.
yes, okay. Who is it?
I'm a Canadian. I'm in Ireland, and I'm self-quarantining because of suspicious symptoms, but I'm also waiting testing before I can hopefully fly home still.
Sure.
I'm wondering what, if we do have the disease, which for me was very mild, so actually it was scarier to think about getting it than thinking, oh, I might have it, and oh, I just need to stay away. That's really important, to stay away from everybody. And of course, that experience is not the same for everybody. But if we do end up getting this, what can we, is there something we can do ritually? Is there a way to engage that can be helpful for the whole?
The general answer is to ask your own wise and kind ancestors what's best for your particular path. I don't want to give a generalized kind of prescription on that, but it's my understanding that there is an immunity that comes, I don't know if it's a full immunity, but a resistance, some degree of immunity that seems to come as a result from what we're understanding from getting the thing. So in that sense, that's a blessing. But I think that there's you could ask the virus directly, the spirit of that thing, what's the blessing here? What would you like me to understand? If I'm to really receive the gift that is your manifestation in the world, what does that look like? And you might get a different answer from, different people get different answers on that, but it's a good question to hold anytime you are having a pathogen or foreign person who's symptomatically present in your body. So I guess that's what I would say. We're here for just a minute. It's really quite brief. And it's good to be loving and to be kind and to not add to the amount of like dogmatic garbage in the world. So if you can, as a general takeaway, if your experience of suffering, and I know you said you weren't particularly symptomatic, so I'm speaking in a more general way. If your experience of suffering can help temper you in a way that you become more compassionate, that's a good way to go with it. Yeah. So why don't we finish up? That's my instinct in this moment, and take just a final 60 seconds with me, with us, with everybody here in silence. I'll stop talking very soon and offer just an outro prayer, but I want you to notice that it's a moment to notice it's not just about the humans. We got to get out of that habit. It's not just about us. I really have heard more birds here. And there's a way in which the others are like, whoa, humans are slowing down. What are they doing? Are they plotting? Are they avoiding us? What are they doing? And so it's a moment to be in it beyond just our species. So let's take a moment to be in it like that. Ancestors and other elder powers who hold up the world and who are the world. We give thanks for our lives and for this moment shared, and ask that you extend kindness, especially to those who are afraid right now, afraid of being alone, and who are suffering and confused, or who have died recently and feel alone, or feel torn up because their people just died and they're not able to be with them. All the people in tough situations right now, may there be a sense of kindness and care extended to them. May we walk with them also in our heart and allow that to help us to be more kind and responsible and loving people. May we rise courageously and humbly to meet the times. Thanks. Shay. Thank you all. Yeah, hope to stay in touch.
Thank you.